Oh, let me hit the OK button. Hold on a second. Okay.
Welcome to Come Together with the Beatles. This is your host, Brooke Halpin, and I'm with my co host, Tom Gouker, and we have a very special guest with us today, and that's Chris Bragg. Chris, welcome to Come Together.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on here with both of you.
Very good. So, can you tell us a little bit about you? Because obviously, you got your Beatle hat on, and I know you
Yep.
Beatles and you do the I've Got a Beatles podcast. But
Yeah.
tell us a little more about you in relationship to how you love the Beatles, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. I did not grow up in a Beatles fan household. So I wasn't given the love of the Beatles from my parents or my brothers or my sisters or anybody. I don't think we had any Beatles anything in the
Hmm.
household. So my discovery of the Beatles was just kind of like on my own. When I was a kid in the 70s, I think the music playing in the household was more like Queen and ELO and
Ah,
things of that nature, maybe Olivia Newton-John, things of that nature. But I was spent a lot of time. Grew up in the country. I spent a lot of time on my own.
which in the
Uh,
country, where in the country?
a little bit south of Champaign, Illinois, in the East Coast, East Central Illinois,
Okay.
little town named Villa Grove,
Oh,
and our graduating class was like 70 people, I think, and it was one of the biggest classes they'd had in a long time. So, but I loved music. I listened to music. I listened to the top 40, and so of course, uh,
well,
Paul had some big hits in the 80s.
yeah, Ringo hits,
And
yeah.
and of course, John's last album would have been sort of a very getting a lot of airplay in 1980, 81. I was familiar with Paul and with John, and less so probably with Ringo and who the Beatles were until I was maybe, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 years old. And then I started buying cassettes, and I got the Beatles great. You can see behind me here. I don't know this audio sometimes and a little bit of video, but I have the Beatles greatest top 20 greatest hits, which I think was released in 1983. I got that. That was the first like Beatles thing I had. Listened to that uh, to the ends of the earth, and then I started getting the my sister, actually my brother-in-law had the Sergeant Pepper tape. And so I distinctly remember listening to the Sergeant Pepper tape the first time in a truck in the country, and one of the speakers was out. So I was only hearing like the left side of Sergeant Pepper, and I was like, this is so strange, but
Mhm.
I loved it.
Well,
But the first time I realized, oh, the speaker's out on the right side. And the first time I actually heard it like full on, you're like, oh, wow. It's like 20 times more amazing than I thought it was. So, another thing is in 1987, so I would have been 14 at the time, they started releasing the CDs. I didn't have a CD player, but there was a radio station in Terre Haute that when and I don't know if you remember this in 87, 88, but they released these two at a time over several months. But
Yeah, definitely.
when the first two came out, this radio station in Terre Haute, which I could barely get in, but I could get in, played the first two Beatles records, Please Please Me and um, Beatles for Sale, right? And I got my cassette ready and I recorded it. So I would have them, one on one side, one on the other side of a dingy, old cassette. And I played those things back and forth, and just like fell totally in love with the Beatles. And from that point on, I was like, okay, I'm all in. I'm gonna get anything I can get. So that was sort of the the origins, I guess.
So you discovered the Beatles on your own.
Yeah.
Little by little, you heard some of their stuff in the 70s, and then it really turned you on in the 80s.
Hmm.
And listen to one side, one speaker of Sergeant Pepper. Let
Yeah.
me tell you, it is such a trip because you want to talk about what they were doing at that time with stereo, and you heard only one side of the stereo. You didn't hear the other side, and that was
Yeah.
the first time you heard Pepper. Wow, wow.
Yeah.
The time I heard Pepper was when it came out in mono, of course,
Yeah.
1907, and I didn't have the experience you had, but hearing it when it first came out, like June 2nd, 1967,
Wow.
or June 1st, somewhere around there. And me and my girlfriend, we played it, and we just lost our minds basically, because it was
Yeah.
just so unlike anything we had heard prior to then, nothing like Revolver because Revolver had preceded it. But
Hmm.
John going off into Tomorrow Never Knows was a bit of an indication. And then, of
Yeah.
course, they released Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane prior to Sergeant Pepper, which George Martin, as you may know, wanted to have Strawberry Fields on the Sergeant Pepper album.
Hmm.
Beatles said no. So they were kind of trying to wean us into the new direction that they were going in. But
Yeah.
but the totality of hearing Pepper when it was first released and all at once it just basically changed the entire music industry. It was the summer of love. Then they released All You Need Is Love, and the Beatles were absolute kings at the time. I mean, they were kings of the rock and roll pop world. But when this happened, it was like it left so many people in the dust, including many, many bands, because bands were not doing that type of thing at the time. There were some bands that were experimenting with psychedelia, the Electric Prunes, um, the Blues Magoos. This
Yeah.
is late late '66 when people were sort of dabbling a bit, but nothing like what, of course, the Beatles did. So,
Yeah.
well, that's great. I'm glad you're on board. I'm glad you got your Beatle hat on, and welcome
Well,
to the show again. Go ahead, please. You want to say something?
Another thing I think we experienced as people who grew up as in the CD generation
Huh?
was we weren't now had no idea that the American albums
Oh, we're different from the UK.
yeah, or even existed really because I was a little beyond the vinyl era. Of course, now we're back in the vinyl era again. But so when the CDs were released, it was the um original UK versions. So
Yes.
those were the versions we discovered and grew up on in our teens
Huh?
where the and really they were released in order so you could get them in the right order and get of course with past masters being the filling out all of the singles, so it's a totally different thing, but I feel like a lot of us grew up sort of like we were English fans of the Beatles who grew up in the 60s rather than listening now to the American albums are so different. And they sound completely different. The original ones, especially with all of the echo and all of
Well,
that.
yeah,
So
well, it's Tom and I, we had long discussions about Dave Dexter Jr., who Capitol Records, and John Lennon absolutely hated what
yeah.
Capitol did to I Feel Fine and She's a Woman, et cetera, et cetera. But that's what they did at Capitol. So,
Hmm.
yeah, the records certainly did sound better. But, Chris, at the time,
Hmm.
for me and my friends during the 60s, when we got the albums, the US versions, that's all
Yeah.
we knew. We didn't know anything about UK versions. So what
Yeah.
we So what we got, we thought, oh, okay, and we loved it because
Yeah,
we didn't have anything to compare it to. You know,
exactly.
we didn't.
Yeah,
We said, oh, wait a minute, what did the UK version sound like? Because we didn't know that the UK versions existed.
yeah.
So
And the
experiment,
American versions, some of them, if you just play it like the tracks are it's just packed with hits. You
Yeah.
know, they're like you wouldn't because on the UK versions the singles were left off the albums, and on the American versions it's like, ooh, let's get those singles in there. Uh, so listening now to the American versions, I'm like, wow, these must have been really like got you going. Uh, like one side of I think the third record that came out, it's just like unbelievable track listing on the US versions because they got those singles in there.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Tom, I know you're having a wonderful day in the Bahamas, but I thought you'd like to chime in with us right now there, Thomas Gouker.
Yeah, Chris. Hey, I am a big fan of your podcast. I've been, as soon as it drops, I listen to it within the 24 hours. It always makes me feel good. And I have conversations back to you guys. If you don't know it, but I'm talking back to you guys as you guys are talking. And you guys are so thorough and researched. And I know we've done this podcast, what we're talking about, the Beatles Come to America. We did just the American, versions.
Yeah.
So we did that, and doing a podcast is almost like a full-time job. So I appreciate what you guys do. I wanted to just admit that I laughed my ass off when you did the review of Sergeant Pepper's the movie.
Oh,
Uh,
wow. Yeah. Oh
that
boy.
Brooke, if you haven't heard it, I haven't seen Sergeant Pepper the movie in a long time. That Robert Stigwood RSO like mess, you can tell the Coke was just everywhere. Like it was just Coke filled illogical like stuff. Stigwood had all that their hands in it, but you guys broke it down, seen the scene, and with a straight face, and
Yeah. Oh, it
I
was rough to have to
it's
watch.
very painful movie to watch. I think it ruined everyone's career.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, uh,
Rightfully so, too. It was just like
mhm,
really bad. And the music was bad too. I mean, other than there's a couple good tracks on it. Earth,
it's
Wind, and
tough.
Fire obviously is really great. I was stunned at like you think you've got Peter Frampton, he's a big star. You've got the Bee Gees, they're big stars. You put them together, you're gonna have magic. But it was
And
the opposite.
and Steve Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
Yes.
really, I saw that movie when it was released, and I think
Oh.
it was 78, I want to say,
Hmm.
1978. And I was sitting there in the theater, and as you probably can tell, I'm a purist, when it comes to the Beatles,
Yeah. Yeah.
like what the Beatles did. I mean,
Yeah.
not exceptions, I'll might go along with some different covers here and there.
Hmm.
But I heard this thing and I saw this mess, it was
yeah.
really, really so hard to take. I really wanted to leave, but my girlfriend at the time said, oh, no, no, let's stay and watch.
Yeah.
Sat
That,
there and I went through the whole damn thing. And I haven't seen it since, and I probably won't see it again as well.
completely
Yeah.
unnecessary. Yeah,
Well,
go ahead.
we're about to record episode 250 is the next one we're going to record. And so to fill out 250 episodes of the podcast, you gotta dig deep and you gotta get into these
Uh,
crevices of the Beatles world and
sure, sure.
listen to Ringo albums that you really don't want to listen to and listen
Uh,
to watching this movie though was probably the worst
yeah.
experience like leading to the podcast. And we research them really well and
Yeah, you do.
take a ton of notes and maybe
Yeah.
use a 1/10 of the notes.
I know what you're talking about. I mean, again, I applaud you for doing such great work and for so many podcasts. I, as well, have done 8 years worth of shows.
Yeah.
When I did my show, let's see, yeah, for 8 years. So I've got 8 years worth of come together with the Beatles. So I know what you mean. You got to find different approaches. You
Yeah.
know, you got to give, of course, I like to give some history and some background information, and as Tom, bless his heart, calls me the Beatle Guru, because I've written 3 books on the Beatles and
Yeah.
et cetera. So, but it's a lot of work, it's a lot of work because what's the point in doing what everybody else is doing in the Beatle world? There's so many people now, especially,
Yeah.
but even 8, 10 years ago when I was doing my show, there were a lot of, I was on the radio. I mean, I was actually on a brick and mortar radio, and then it
Hmm.
was syndicated on different channels as well. So the trick for me was to get as many interesting guests on,
Hmm.
information, had experiences with the Beatles, who knew something that I didn't know about the Beatles. And that really, really, really did a lot for my program. People like, for instance, John's half sister, Julia Lennon, Julia
Yeah.
Baird is the name that she goes by. Or Bruce Spicer is, Bruce is a huge name in the Beatle world.
Mm.
A lot of people like that. So so I understand, what it takes to do the kind of work that you do, and thank you for doing it. I wanted to mention something regarding I've Got a Beatles podcast. Is I happened to listen to the episode you did about Alan Klein.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was absolutely fantastic.
Yep.
I wanted to bring up one thing though about that.
Yeah. Okay.
The whole bit about when the Beatles went off for the first time to see the Maharishi. This was the day of the death of Brian Epstein. And when they got back, they got off the train, and the reporters had heard that Brian was gone. And the reporter went up to John and, John, we heard about the death of your manager. What are you guys going to do? What do you think? And this is what John said. I have a tape of it somewhere.
Hmm.
And John said, "We're screwed."
Huh.
He didn't
Yeah.
say screwed. He used the stronger version of screwed.
Yeah.
Okay. So John knew at that moment that was it for the Beatles, because Brian was the only one that they listened to, because Brian made them superstars.
Yeah.
And now with Brian gone, then there's no one to keep them together as a unit, because Brian always said, "You're not 4 individuals, you're one unit, you're the Beatles, you're the band." Poof. All of a sudden, these individual personalities start to come out.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of the end of the Beatles. Now, one other point. Before Brian died in 1967, he met with Robert Stigwood, and he brought Robert into NEMS. So,
Mm.
so Robert Stigwood was working with Brian early 67. And then so when
Mm.
Brian died, Robert Stigwood was presumed to take over Brian's place. And when the Beatles heard about that, they refused to work with Robert Stigwood.
Mhm.
Now, why they refused, I don't know. I don't know if it was a personality thing. Brian was gay, Robert was gay, so I'm sure it has nothing to do with the gayness of the world that was back then. But
Yeah.
it's really interesting because we know what happened with Stigwood. I mean, Stigwood then became a superstar in his own right.
Yeah.
You know, with bands like the Bee Gees and Cream, at Blind Faith, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, he did all the musicals and he did Grease and et cetera, et cetera. So just when I listened to it, I thought, oh, God, there's that little piece of
Yeah.
Robert's.
It's a little detail
Yeah,
that we
Mhm.
that's
just didn't know from our research. It's interesting though you brought that up because I keep seeing Stigwood coming up in the new
Yeah.
blue book
Yeah.
from Alan Kozin and Sinclair. Great book, wonderful book, but his name just keeps popping up
yeah,
especially in the 70s of like he's trying to get this other project going and they don't want it. They don't want to do get that movie going. So eventually, of course, leads to the Sergeant Pepper movie.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately for everyone.
Mhm.
So
Tom?
We do like a quick fire. We just wanted to see where you're at with your favorites. You were talking
mhm.
about Ringo. I would love you to do Ringo, the Fourth, and Bad Boy. They're the two worst albums I've ever heard in my life, but wonderful at the same time. And then you
Yeah.
have the TV show to go along with it.
Oh yeah, we did a review of the TV show. We watched that. I mean, I don't know why we keep reviewing things that are hard to find, so hard to find,
Uh,
but that show was a trip.
yeah, a very unorganized and confusing.
Yeah.
So just the we want to ask you like, what's your favorite George song? Did you get one? It can be a Beatles song too.
Ooh, favorite George song. Boy. Uh is something maybe? That's very difficult. Something I really love the George album, George Harrison from 1979. I like
Yeah,
several
yeah,
tracks
great.
on that. I think are just wonderful. I think it's a very underrated album. So that's probably my favorite George album.
Yeah.
But something's hard to beat. It's phenomenal song. But then you think, oh wait, what about why my guitar gently weeps? Or, it's George has got so many great songs and a lot of bad songs. Let's be
Yeah,
honest.
oh, definitely. And that's what I like about your podcast. You guys don't pull any punches.
Yeah,
It's
Paul, what would be your favorite Paul song? Can be a Beatles song, can be his own songs.
favorite Paul song. It's so hard. That is so hard. Um, boy, I
Want to do a pass and come
well,
back to it later?
yeah. Let's pass on Paul because that is because I'm a big Paul guy. I'm probably more Paul than the other three. I love all the Beatles, but I'm a huge fan of Paul's solo catalog. I like Tug of War a lot. I like, but it would probably because that was around the time I started getting into the Beatles pretty young there. I really like Flaming Pie. I think it's a great album.
Hmm.
There's one track. I'm not sure if this is my favorite Paul song. But there's one track that nobody ever talks about, and it's this song "You Tell Me,"
Hmm.
which is on what album is that on?
Egypt Station.
Uh, is it Egypt Station? I think it's the one before Egypt
oh,
Station. Or,
No?
or what? No, what is it? It's the one that's like over processed. That's very loud in the mix. They really need to do a remix on that album. But this,
something or something.
well,
Memory almost full.
Memory Almost Full. That is it.
Memory's almost full. Yeah.
That's right. But I really like that song because it's Paul, an old Paul singing, and he's forgetting things, and it's just a very human song and a really underrated, beautiful song about life, about like you're trying to remember these images. And when was the summer that we did this? I don't even remember now. So
Mhm.
I just really really adore that song. I always recommend like what's an underrated Paul song. I always recommend that one. So
It is memory almost full.
yeah,
Yeah. All right, we got John. Do you have a John one?
John. Oh, John. Oh, I'm only sleeping. I think
Ah,
I really love that song. I think it's a wonderful track. And people don't mention that one is it's on Revolver. It also is sort of like Tomorrow Never Knows, of like an evolution of, it's got that backwards guitar solo and
Yeah.
just the sonics of it are really spectacular. So,
Do you have a Ringo one?
ooh, I,
I do the
well,
blast of the past
I'm
out.
the greatest is great. I mean, I'm the greatest, a very very fun, very good song. He's got some good tracks throughout his catalog. The problem is every album has like two or three good tracks on it, and then quite frankly, a lot of duds. you
Yeah.
know, Not every album, but like Time Takes Time's a pretty solid album. Vertical Man's a good song. I like that song. I feel like he hits he hits the mark two or three times a record pretty well. And it's usually the weirder ones that I like, um I can't think of one off the top of my head, but usually his tracks where he's trying to do something different. Because we've talked on the EPs are full of you released four EPs, and they're full of really trite
Yeah, yeah, they were.
lyrical, like, you know, um we're let's all be friends in the world and peace and love. It's the same thing over and over again. So when he swings at something different and does a different type of style or a different type of thing, I find that more interesting.
Yeah,
So, but
Well, it's interesting when you mentioned I'm the Greatest. Of course, that's the Ringo album. And back in 73, everybody was besides themselves with joy because it was the closest thing to a Beatles reunion.
yeah.
Because you had John, who's on I'm the Greatest. He co-wrote it really he worked with Ringo on that. You've got Paul and Linda on there as well.
Hmm.
I believe George also is on I'm the Greatest, and maybe one other track. Sail Away Raymond, I think I don't know if that's on that album or not. It might be. But at the time, it was the closest we got to a Beatles reunion because in '73 we were going nuts because
Yeah.
they were all alive, and it's like the rumors were going around, and John would kind of tease a little bit and say, well, if we want to get together, we'll get together, but who knows, and stuff like that, and Paul would say something else, and
That's a
it's
much better John impression than I have, by the way. I have a decent poll, but I can't get John.
oh,
I've tried. It just doesn't.
Chris Stone's in the nose. That's where he is, Chris. Paul's up here, Paul's talking like that. He's going to be fine, just like a fine wine. So anyhow, um,
Fantastic.
yeah, thank you. You mentioned something, of course, and I'm sure you probably know this Frank Sinatra story, right? You know what happened
Yeah.
with it's the greatest love song written by Lennon and McCartney,
Yeah.
which is really a shame. He corrected himself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just for me, because you bring up Ringo, just for fun, my favorite Ringo song. I mean, I love Photograph. That was the one
Oh
where
yeah.
that was the one
Photographs fantastic.
George wrote that primarily. He's the writer on Photograph. I love Photograph. That probably might be my favorite Ringo song. But also, I Want to Be Santa Claus by Ringo.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever heard it or not, but
Oh yeah. Oh,
I
definitely.
all the time, every Christmas time, I'm always playing, I want to be Santa Claus.
Is that your favorite of the Beatles Christmas? Like better than
Oh, well, Christmas time is here. And you
yeah.
got to go to that one. Everywhere it's Christmas at the end of every year. Those are like the ones that they did for their fans only in the UK.
Yeah. Yeah.
Little discs. Buddy of mine from Scotland gave me those discs in a little booklet, the fan thing, and I was listening to them like in '67 or '60.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, oh wow, this is really great stuff because in the
Yeah.
States, and we didn't know nothing about that because they were only made for the fans in the Beatles fan club in the UK. So it
Mhm.
was
Wow.
really special stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I like the Christmas stuff. I like I even like Wonderful Christmas Time, which some people hate.
Oh, oh,
Love it.
okay. Yeah.
So,
That of course war is over. I mean,
yeah.
uh, with John and Yoko. I mean,
Oh
that's
yeah, that's a wonderful
of
track.
course they just lifted the melody from I believe it was Peter, Paul, and Mary. I think it was, or someone else. It's not an original melody, but they adapted the melody and they turned it into uh, Happy Christmas. War is over, which is that's you have to hear that every Christmas. I mean, it's part of a Christmas caroling, I think, at this point.
Yeah. Mm.
Are you caught up with the merchandise? Like now that we have a Beatle machine where we're guaranteed a deluxe box set around Christmas time, we got one on one, we got
Yeah.
there. I mean, I feel like it's your obligation for your podcast that you gotta
I,
stay current, but it's a lot of work.
yeah, well, here's the thing. Dave and I aren't rich men by any stretch of the imagination. So I got to pick and choose. I mean, there's streaming, so you can hear most of the things that are released on streaming, but I did get the Revolver box set on vinyl. I got the big set from not the big set that was in the crate, but the All Things Must Pass set.
Yeah.
But I didn't get some of the other releases,
The
like the
mind game.
Mind Games. I think I finally got Mind Games on sale, but only the one disc vinyl. So there's certain vinyl things I'd like to have, but I'm not. I've got to
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, I got to feed myself, and I don't have a great job where I'm making tons and tons of money. So I think that's we talk a lot about the pricing of things on the podcast sometimes when these releases come out, and is the bang worth the buck?
Yeah.
Because I think like Collector fan who's going to collect and buy everything and get two copies and keep one in the sealed in never I'm not interested in any of that.
Yeah.
That's not not a collector as far. I mean, obviously I'm a collector, but I'm a collector to listen. I want to hear the music. I want, and in that, for instance, the vinyl Revolver set, you had a disc of the mono cut, clean pressing of the mono cut of Revolver, um, half speed mastered and all that. So I've played that probably more than the new mix or anything like that. So there's some products I'm like eager to get when they come out. I'll be very eager to dive deep into the one-to-one concert when it comes out because I have a feeling that it's going to sound very good,
Yeah.
much better than the which I did like the release, the John Lennon live release that we got back in the day. I had it on tape and played it, a lot back then, but I'm eager to hear when new things do come out. I am eager to hear them sometimes, and you know,
I
part of
think it's
that's because we didn't grow up. I didn't grow up in the '60s and buy the record in the '60s. I didn't have one to take good care of, and didn't want to spend $400 to get a, you know, VG plus pressing of these old Beatles albums, which are kind of becoming more and more scarce and harder to get. Um, so I'm eager to get things that are like a quality bang for the buck kind of thing, and to get books that are good, too, that are like these new books. We were talking about the red and the blue book.
yeah,
Uh,
great books.
Very good. Those Paul books, and I got the Luca Perassi books, and so I'm probably gonna be buying more books maybe than.
Oh, good. Did you buy my books yet?
Not yet, but they're on the top of my list to get. So, you
I've got
should see my Beatles wish list on my Amazon account. It's just like crazy. So, but yeah, I will be purchasing your book. Very
three books, Beatles, in case you didn't know. Three
Yeah,
of them.
three of them. Okay,
You can send him a signed copy.
that'd be
Yeah,
that'd be great. That'd be wonderful.
yeah, yeah.
Love to read it.
Thank you.
We are
We'd
we're
love
all
to have you on too. To our podcast. It'd be
Oh, that'd be great.
fantastic.
Be a pleasure. Just let me
Yeah,
know when. Yeah,
I
sure.
will. I will.
well,
Okay.
we were chatting ahead of time. I said, how about deep dive David Cassidy? Like and because he was a hanger-on. Like he was, hanging out with John and Yoko a lot. Like he was Yoko's date a lot of times when they were single, and then he was hanging out with Paul McCartney in that Blue Book when the guitarist ripped open his hand. So he was always buzzing around the business, the Beatles world.
Yeah, well, we're always looking for Beatles friends.
Yeah, it's a good one.
For our Beatles friends. I mean, we've done, shows on sort of peripheral to the Beatles stuff. We did the Apple Scruffs, where we went through a lot of the Apple artists and Badfinger and Mary Hopkin and uh, people of that nature. So it's not where we've done only Beatles, and we have a YouTube channel called Song Album Career where we talk about non-Beatles or releases. We've had a couple episodes out of some Dylan releases and some things like that. Dave and I used to we met in college,
We're almost at that time.
and we met and we started just emailing back and forth a lot. So we were like, let's start talking about this and record it. So that's how our podcast started, and now we're getting into some of those other discussions we used to
That's
have.
great. Well, listen, it looks like we're coming to a close. Chris, I want to thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you. And we'll be back again with another episode of Come Together right here, right now.